Just like to introduce you to Jonte, who now you can see behind the brand new drumming screen. All right, he's just disappeared because he's embarrassed. It's fantastic. We've got a brand new drumming screen. So if you came in this morning and said, there's something different in the house today, it's because we're trying to manage the sound on stage, and that was one of the things. We've been working toward that for a long time, and we've got it in place. So it's absolutely amazing. It's awesome. And we're just progressively chipping away at things because there is a progressive unfolding of the purposes and plans of God in our life. And I want to speak to you about that today. I want to talk to you today about don't take your eyes off the big picture. Last Sunday, we introduced this concept of some things in our lives that we should never do. Some doors that we step through, and once you've stepped through those doors, they are sort of like boundaries in your life. And then you look back and you look at those things and you say, I'm not going back to that again because I know what that was like. I've come out of that and I'm moving forward. And last Sunday we talked about, do you remember? Anyone here last week? Oh, thanks, Sally. All right, we talked about the idea of never go back to something that didn't work. And if you do go back, make sure you're going back in order to go forward. Some concepts and some ideas in our lives that there are some things that we know don't work, so let's not go back to them. Like even if you are pressed hard, don't go back to something that you know that in your past has not worked. And so this morning I want to talk to you about this idea about not taking our eyes off the big picture. It's very easy when you're raising kids to get caught up in something that a child is doing at one moment of time in their life and to forget about the fact that you are raising a life. You're not dealing with an individual situation of discipline. You are raising somebody's life. You are equipping them for the future of what God has for them in everything that is going to be coming. Everything that they will be experiencing. We are equipping our kids for and preparing them and training them. So if you go overboard on one particular incident, and you lose sight of the fact that you need to maintain a relationship of trust and respect with our kids as they grow. And kids, if you lose sight of the fact that your parents are shaping you because they know what is ahead of you, if you lose sight of the big picture of your life, you can get really upset with each other because over something that's happening in this particular moment in time. And I want to speak to that idea. I want to speak to it because there are some things that are happening in our emotions in these circumstances and situations, and then we're going to look at a Bible story. We're going to look at a character who's in a situation where the things that we're going to be talking about this morning make a difference, and some of these ideas are going to help you because you're going through some circumstances and situations where if you don't understand this principle, you can get buried very, very quickly, not realizing that there is a long-term game plan that you and I are a part of, and that there is an incredible destiny and a future that God has for us in our future. So here's the key principle. Never go back. Don't take your eyes off the big picture. Never go back to losing sight of the big picture in your life. Don't get so caught up in the minute details that you lose sight of what you are actually working on. So those of you who work in software, you work in like dealing with problems, solving problems, like in a piece of program that's not working, you can get so caught up in the technicality of one particular problem that's happening, and it can take you a long time to solve problems like that. It can become consuming, and you get caught up in it, and it just becomes like you forget about the whole purpose of what the piece of software is accomplishing. And so you can get buried in the detail of what we do and forget about what we're actually delivering. You can get caught up in something that might happen on one particular Sunday when you come to church, when someone doesn't speak to you, and think that defines the whole church experience. It doesn't. You can look at one particular person or one or two or three or four particular characters who may be misrepresenting Jesus in some particular way, and then you dismiss the whole church and you dismiss everything that God's doing and you dismiss what God's doing in your life because what you've done is you've lost sight of the big picture. You've focused on one particular incident or one or two or three or maybe something that's confirmed your excuse. Say, I don't need to pay attention to that because look at that person. No, you've lost sight of the big picture. And so the challenge of this is don't ever take your eyes off the big picture. Dr. Henry Cloud tells a story in his book, Don't Go Back, about working as a consultant during the period 2008. Anybody remember what happened in 2008? The financial crisis that thankfully here in New Zealand we were a little bit cushioned from it. In other places around the world the impact was far greater, far more significant. And so he was consulting with many different industries about what was going on in their staff and how they were managing to maintain their motivation. Some high achievers were doing really, really well, even in the middle of all of the challenges, but some high achievers were tanking. They were just bottoming out. They were failing in their responsibility, and particularly on Wall Street. So he met with a number of them to find out and to explore and to discover what's actually going on in the lives of people who are succeeding and those that are failing, even though they were both high achievers. And he found out something very, very significant. If you have a look at this particular screen here, the next particular graph, you can see on the very right-hand side, this is a graph of the S&P 500, which is a measure of 500 major companies on the US stock exchange. And you can see in 2008, it went from that point of 3,405, it tanked right down to under 2,400. Many people lost huge amounts of money during that particular period of time. Caused incredible panic around the world, and we felt the echo of it here. Now, if you were in the middle of that, and if you were a stock exchange, if you were a trader, if you were somebody managing that particular experience, if you'd invested, if you'd put your money into the stock market just before that happened, and the whole thing bottomed out, what would you be feeling? Like incredible tension, incredible fear, incredible stress. And what Dr. Henry Cloud found was that the people who survived and did well in this situation were people who had lived long enough to know that that occurrence is not a singular occurrence. It's not the only time that has ever happened. It's not the only time it will ever happen in the future. They'd been around long enough, or they'd had enough experience to look back far enough and to imagine things far enough in the future to realize that this situation is not the end of the story. And I want to press that into your spirit this morning. Because if we lose sight of the big picture, if we lose sight of what God is doing in our future, in our calling, in our lives, in what our lives will be in the future that God has for us, when things tank and when the bottom falls out of our world, and suddenly everything that we thought was secure for us is no longer there, what do? You will either learn some new strategies, I'm going to talk about that in a minute, or you will bottom out and think, oh, it's the end. And some people actually took their lives as a result of it. But here's the thing. If you look at the next slide, the guys that survived were people who looked back far enough. You can see, this is looking forward. So the round circle is 2008. What they knew and understood was that things will change. So that bottom circle is the bottom of 2008. Right up the top right-hand corner is where we are today. That's almost twice what it was. It's over twice of what the stock market dropped to. So there were some people who made an incredible fortune in a time of absolute despair. Why? Because they had a bigger picture in mind. Let's look at the next slide. I'm now taking you back a little bit further. So now you've got the circle of 2008 in the middle there, and now you can see a little bit of the history. And in the history, you can see times when the market went up and times when the market went down. If you know this is going to happen, you are prepared for it and you have different strategies. If your life is changing and it just seems the bottom is falling out of it, if you don't recognize that you're in the context of something bigger than what is happening in this moment, you are losing sight of the bigger picture. I want to call you back this morning to keep your eyes on the bigger picture. The guys that survived were the people that recognized that things were going to change. They had to learn how to do things differently. They could remember 1973. They could remember the bubble in 2000 and 2002. They had a different perspective. They learned how to trade differently. This next slide shows you something in the market which is called volatility. Volatility is how different the price might be tomorrow. Simple explanation. And when it's really high, when volatility is really, really high, what that says is we've got no clue what the price is going to be tomorrow. It could be way up here or it could be way down here. So volatility is really high. Uncertainty is very, very high. in times of uncertainty, if you know how to trade this in a different strategy, you can make incredible amounts of money understanding volatility. But if you don't understand this in times of uncertainty and you don't know how to trade that and you've got all your money in, it's going to go up all the time, it's always going to go up, it's gone down. If you don't know that, and if you're not prepared for that, and if you can't trade differently, you won't survive in the market. But the guys that did understand this made an incredible amount of money when everybody else was losing money. I think the point's made there. You are intended, the point is that you're intended for the long term. God has put something in your spirit that is intended for the long term. You can think long term. You can think big picture. You can understand that what you're experiencing at the moment is temporary in the light of something which God is doing and has got a hold of your life for. Here are some things that seeing the big picture does. Number one, it gets you out of the present feelings that everything is bad. When you remember that there is a future and there's a past, that you've got a context and you're in the middle of a situation and there's a future ahead of you, it gets you out of this thing of feeling like everything is bad. This is 1 minute in the hour. This is 1 hour in the day. This is one conversation in my long-term relationship. This one conversation doesn't determine what the future is going to be like. Are you getting the picture? Like, this is 1 week. I've had a terrible week. Fantastic. Well, it's good that you've got another week coming up and another week after that and another week after that. You have a bigger picture happening in your life. Don't give up just because you've had a hard week. This is 1 year in a decade. This is 1 decade in a lifetime. In a few months, we're going to be celebrating 30 years in this particular building. I'm so excited at the moment because I'm walking up and down stairs that have got carpet on them. On the front of the stairs are these silver little things. I said this morning to Derek, I feel like I work in a real church now because we've got carpet on our stairs. I'm just making the point that progressively your life changes in different ways. We put up with things for so long, recognizing and realizing that we're a part of a bigger story. In a little while, some of the team are going to come and talk to us about a fundraising event that we've got coming up, and I've asked them to come and talk to you because we recognize that where we are now is not where we're stopping. What is happening to us today doesn't define what we are stepping into. Who we have been in the past is not who we're going to stay in the months coming up, for this reason, that you are built with long-term in mind. Here's point number 2. It changes what you do next. When you keep the big picture in mind, it changes what you do next. You'll do things that lead to higher, bigger outcomes that you desire instead of just reacting to how you feel today. If we gave in to our emotions when we get up every morning, if we let that determine our big picture, we get the whole picture screwed up. If you allow your big picture to determine what you are doing today, you keep moving forward. But if you allow how you're feeling today to determine what your big picture is, your big picture gets messed up. Got to keep the big picture in mind. Number 3, it allows you to learn through what you are going through. You learn things very, very differently when you're in pain, when something is challenging you. You've got to find new ways of surviving. You've got to learn new ways of getting through this, of overcoming it. What am I going to do now? How am I going to get through this? How am I going to survive? How do I need to change? We talked a little bit about that last week. What has to happen in me in order for me to survive and progress through this? You learn new ways of doing things. For successful people, here's the key underlying thought about this. Instead of thinking it's over, people ask, what does this scene in the movie of my life teach me right here, right now? What have I got to learn from this scene in the movie of my life right here, right now? Here's the thought. For successful people, no one event is ever the whole story. No one event is ever the whole story. No one event in your marriage is ever the whole story in your marriage. No 1 week in your lives together is ever the whole story of your life together. No one experience is ever the end of your story. You keep this in mind. If you're going to succeed, you've got to keep this in mind every single day of your life. Every challenge that comes at you, everything that you're overcoming, everything that you are pressed into, you have to understand this is not the end of the story. Keep the main thing the main thing. When you keep the big picture in mind, it changes how you learn. You experience negative emotions when our expectations are interrupted. I thought this was going to happen. It never happened. Oh, man, it's just all falling apart. Why? Because what you expected was going to happen never happened. But for someone who didn't have that expectation, they don't have the same emotional experience as you do. You have a negative experience because of your expectation of what is going to happen. We lose hope. Everything feels bad. It's not going to get better. And this is the emotional journey we go through. Are you ready? 3 major stages I want to talk to you about this morning, because if you recognize these, it'll be helpful. The first one is that it becomes personal. What's wrong with me? Particularly if this is a relationship issue. Like if your relationship's failing or falling apart or something, or like somebody's left you, or you got deserted, or you got left standing at the altar, or something, I don't know, like a relationship challenge. The way we think about ourselves is, what's wrong with me? Am I not attractive enough? Have I not done enough? Like, am I not nice enough? Like what's wrong with me in this circumstance or situation? Or if you didn't get the job, you went to the interview, you thought you had it, you thought you nailed it, but you don't get the job, and then you start thinking, what's wrong with me? Like, am I just missing something, or am I a second-rate citizen? And there it goes to a thought of, this is pervasive. So this is now not just about me. This is now everybody else around me thinks that I must be terrible. You recognize this progression of thinking where something goes wrong and say, oh gosh, I'm such a failure. I can't do anything right. Like, I don't even know why I'm here, because I can't do anything. Like, I just seem to stuff up all the time. And then the next thought is, and they all think that I'm a failure as well. My family thinks I'm a failure. My team thinks I'm a failure. My boss thinks that I'm always failing. So now it becomes pervasive. Now it's not just in my own thinking about me. Now it's pervasive. Now everything else around me is against me. Everything else thinks that I'm a failure, and I take that on as well. And then the third stage is it then becomes permanent. It goes permanent. Now we start to think like this. It will always be this way. And can you see the downhill spiral from, oh, what's wrong with me? Something happened. The situation that I'm in, I'm a part of this. Something happened to me. I think, what's wrong with me? And then, everybody thinks I must be like this. And then it's always going to be like this, and nothing's ever going to change. That's when you lose hope. That's when you become discouraged. That's when you become depressed, because you have lost sight of a bigger picture that's taking place in your life. Big pictures change the way you feel. Because if you can step back far enough, if you can see the big picture, you can change how you feel about your position in that picture. When you're at the bottom of 2008, you think, oh man, this is never going to change. No, it changed within a matter of weeks, a matter of months, and then the stock price got back up to where it was before. And then over a couple of years, it's even gone twice what it was. And this happens to us in our lives as well. It changes the way you feel. It changes the way you act. It changes what you do. When you realize that the pain the other person has caused you is not personal, and it's not permanent for you, and it's not pervasive in all of your relationships, you then start to do something differently. You join a connect group, or you find some other people that will support you or do life with you, and they reaffirm you, and they talk you through it, and they allow you to be honest about what's going on in your world, and honest about what's going on, and you can reflect on it with a group of people that love you. This is why we encourage you to be a part of a connect group. It's not just so that we can look good in terms of the numbers of people that go to connect groups. That's not the point. The point is that you've got a support team that will carry you through the circumstances and situations of your life when things tank. Like our connect groups is our pastoral care network. Like I'm the pastor, but I'm not your pastor in a sense. You know what I mean? Like I'm your pastor, but I'm not the one who sits and has coffee with you. I would love to. Seriously, I would. I'm crying. And seriously, I would love to. Like we would love to do that, but we can't, because it's not possible. And so we do that together. That's the model of care. That's the model of pastoral care in this church family. that you do life with a family group that is your support team. And so you start to do things differently. You start to act differently. And then you learn differently. You learn about why people act the way they do. You learn why some people are narcissistic, and you learn about that. And then you recognize, actually, when they behaved that way, it wasn't about me at all. It was about their own needs and their own insecurity and the stuff that was going on in their world. And so you start to recognize, actually, it's not personal, and it's not pervasive, and it's not permanent. I can actually do something different in this situation. I can make some decisions about things going forward. And you learn about yourself in a new way. You find out what you need for yourself. People in sports encounter this challenge all the time. Like when you're playing a sport, particularly if it's a sport that's focused on you personally, like golf, for example, and you make a bad hit and the ball doesn't go where you want it to go, then your thinking starts to go like this. Man, that was a lousy hit. Why did I even think that I could play this game? Why did I even think that I could win this game? Man, I'm just going to be terrible. You know what? They all think that I'm terrible. And you know what? It's always going to be like this. I'm never going to win a game. You see the progression in thinking? Like something goes wrong, and then you go from personal to pervasive to permanent very, very quickly. But a professional will think, actually, that was just one hit. I've done this 1,000 of times. I don't know what tomorrow's going to be a different day. I'm going to pick it up again, and I'm going to go again. I'm going to have another go, and I'm going to push again, because I know that I can change, I can improve, I can deal with the stuff that I need to work on. I can keep progressing these areas. This photo next is of a Norwegian sportswoman. She is a rock climber, mountain climber. She was introduced to rock climbing by her older brother and her friends. And through their patience and the support, they allowed her to grow in confidence, and she soon excelled at the sport, and she competed at an international level. She talks about a situation that happened in her life. In 2012, she fell. She nearly died in a 50-foot ground fall. So she was on a mountain, on a rock. She fell, hit the ground. And she was climbing with her husband in Turkey, and this is her talking about it. It left me with a broken back, pelvis, arm, and 2 badly broken ankles. I was in a wheelchair for months, and I had to relearn how to walk. What do you feel when you're in that situation? All of the emotions that we've just described. Personal, man, what a stupid person I am. Like, what did I think of? Like, why was I doing that? Why could I ever think that I could, and then everybody else must think I'm stupid. Man, I'm always going to be stupid. Like we were watching something during the week, and this phrase where this is not what you say to your spouse. You are always stupid. You're stupid today, and you're always going to be stupid. Right? That's not really helpful. Okay, Ty doesn't say that to me. I've taught her not to say that to me. Okay, so you can imagine she's in a wheelchair for months. She has to relearn how to walk. You can imagine what she's thinking, what she's feeling. This is always going to be this way. And then she continues, my motivation came from a deep passion for what I'm doing, climbing and being active. I'm not a person who gives up that easily, even when things seem impossible at first. Making impossible moves possible is what I love about rock climbing. I think that's what brought me back from the cloud that I was in. When I was laying on the ground at my husband's feet, dying. Interesting when this crackle comes in, isn't it? Like just when it's all right, I give up. Got to fix this. Making impossible moves possible is what I love about rock climbing, and I think that's what brought me back from the cloud that I was in. When I was lying on the ground at my husband's feet, dying seemed like the easiest option. You might be in a challenge experience at the moment. Dying seems like the easiest option. Why? Because you are losing sight of the bigger picture. You're focused on what's happening here and now. But choosing life and living it fully is the most challenging thing that we are faced with. It wasn't just getting back into rock climbing that motivated me throughout the recovery process. It was the freedom of motion. Being active and playing in the outdoors is a huge part of so many aspects of my life, and my happiness depends on it. I knew I had to give it all in the recovery process if I was going to be able to live with myself. Knowing that I did my very best during recovery left me with good feelings and higher goals. As the recovery went forward, it turned into training. not just recovering. And I used the same motivation and the same strategy in training for climbing. I wasn't afraid of dreaming big and setting higher goals, but most important, I made small goals every day, and I set one foot in front of the other, and after 8 months, I climbed some of the hardest routes in my life. Just have a look at the next picture. That's her in the red and the blue at the top. Like, there are so many stories like this. And some of our friends are going through this right now, and the journey is lasting a little bit longer than a couple of months. It's heading into years. But I want to encourage you this morning. We're going to look at a passage of Scripture now. I want to encourage you in this morning that what is happening to you is a slice in time of your life. It's a slice in time of your eternal life. It's a slice in time of what God has for you in the bigger picture. Let's look at 1 Samuel 25. Last week we looked at 1 Samuel 24. In 1 Samuel 24 we encountered David. We came across David. He was running from Saul. He made a decision not to go back to what he knew wouldn't work. He made a decision to keep on trusting God to look after him. Fast forward a little bit. David's team are out in the wilderness. They've got this job going on where they look after the farmers in the area. And David had said to his team, guys, look after these ones. Don't steal their sheep. Don't pinch anything. You are their protectors. This is who we are. This is how we do things. One guy stole a sheep and David slapped him. He said, go and give it back. I said, well, I've eaten it. Well, go and find another one and give it back to him. Like, this was what David was teaching his team. He said, no, we are honest. We look after people. If we're going to lead a nation, we have to learn how to look after the people that God's given to us here and now. And he made that decision that's how he was training his team. Team, we are protectors. We are the ones who bring protection and blessing into a nation. And now we come into this story here. Let's pick it up, and I've got to put my glasses on so I can read it because my Bible's getting smaller. I love this story. This is an awesome story. There's a bit of romance in here. Yep. And Samuel died, and all Israel gathered together and mourned for him and buried him at his house in Ramah. And David rose and went out to the wilderness. Now there was a man in Moan whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. And it came about while he was shearing his sheep in Carmel, the man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail, and the woman was intelligent and beautiful in appearance. Can I just say something? That's what the women in this church are like. They're intelligent and beautiful in appearance. Hey, we pray for husbands for you, for those of you that are single. So we're praying for intelligent and beautiful husbands. We've just sent Eliana off to Europe to find Wally. You know that book, Where's Wally? Well, so you can pray for her while she's away for the next 5 weeks that she finds Wally. No, seriously. Like, you are beautiful and you're intelligent women. You're a cut above the rest. There's just a quality about you. And that's what this woman was like. Beautiful in appearance, but the guy, well, he was harsh and he was evil. Well, that's not what like the men in this house are like. So we're learning about what someone who is not us is like. Can you just, like, if you take on something that happens to you because Nabal is harsh and he's a bad man, and yet he does something to you, can you see how you can make a personal decision, but it's not about you? Abigail's in this story. Things are happening to Abigail. But it's not because she wasn't a quality woman. It was because he wasn't a quality man. And that's the mistake. That's the first mistake that we make. We think it's personal when sometimes it's personal. Sometimes we've got to deal with our stuff. Sometimes we've got to fix stuff in our own lives. Sometimes we are a part of the problem. But if we make every problem personal, we miss the bigger picture. Verse 4. David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep, so it was party time for them.
So David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, go up to Carmel, visit Nabal, and greet him, and speak to him nicely, and say, this is what you should say. Have a long life, Nabal. Peace be to you. We're your friends. We love you. Peace on your house, and peace be to everything that you have. We've heard that you have shearers, so there's a lot of food going on around you, and you're killing some sheep to feed everyone, so it's party time. You're cooking it up. There's boil up happening. And now I've heard that you've got shearers, and your shearers, they've been with you, and we haven't insulted any of your team, nor have they missed anything all the days they were with us in Carmel. Wouldn't that be a great testimony for someone to be able to come to us and say, you know those guys that work in Potter or Elam? Whenever they work with us, we never lose anything. The work always gets done to 110%. There's a different standard about the work of people here in this place. This is what David's men were coming to Nabal and saying, this is how we treated you guys. When they were around us, they didn't lose anything because we were their protectors. There was something about our heart toward them. Nabal, we were your bodyguards. We were your security team. We were your safety. We were your fence. We stopped people attacking your people. We kept your guys alive. You're eating sheep today because we kept them alive. This is what the guys were basically saying to Nabal. And how did Nabal respond? Verse 6, and you should say, have a long life, la, 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 la. Have I heard verse 8? Ask your young men, and I'll tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, because we've come on a festive day. Please give whatever you can find in your hand to servants and to your son David. Now, you'd think that if Nabal had any sense, he would say, guys, we are so thankful for looking after us and for protecting us. But what does Nabal say? Remember, he's not a nice man. David's young men came, and they spoke to Nabal according to all these words in David's name, and then they waited. Nabal answered David's servant and said, who's David? And who's the son of Jesse? There are many servants today that are each breaking away from their master. Shall I then take my bread and my water and everything that I have, selfish man, and share them with you and give them to men whose origin I don't know? He wasn't interested. He wasn't thankful. He wasn't appreciative. He was rude. And you read later on the story about he would just ridiculed these guys. And so the young men go back to David. So David's young men retreated their way and went back, and they came and they told, according to all these words, things back to David. And David said to his men, right, if that's the way you're going to play, let's get down to it. He's in fight or flight. Why? Because what he expected was going to happen didn't happen. Unfulfilled expectations are the source of negative emotions. Suddenly, David rises up and says, you think you're going to treat me like that when I spent all this time looking after you? I had to pay these guys for such a long time, and they were your guards, and you didn't lose anything, and now you're not going to give me anything, you're not going to pay me? You think that's the way it's going to work? This guy is getting worked up. This is David. He's just said to Saul, who's been after his life, Saul, I'm not going to take your life. I trust God. I put my life in God's hand. Hang on a moment. That was just the previous chapter. What's happened to the dude? That's like you and me. Oh, praise you, Jesus. I trust in you for my life. I believe in you. You're going to look after me. You did what to me? The following day. Why? Why is this happening? Let's read on. It gets better. Each of you put on your swords. So every man girded on his sword, and David girded on his sword. He says, and about 400 men went up behind David, while 200 stayed behind with the baggage. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, David sent these messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, and he scorned them. But the men were very good to us, and we weren't insulted, nor did we miss anything as long as we were about with them and while we were in the fields. They were a wall to us both day and night, and all the time that we were with them tending the sheep. Now, therefore, have a think about it, Abigail, because evil is plotted against our master and against all of his household. He's such a worthless man that no one can speak to him. We don't want that said of anyone in this house. But Abigail's in the middle of it. David is now experiencing the emotion of this man's behavior. You're now about to encounter one of the most wise conversations that I think is in the scripture. This is why I married Ty. Abigail hurried and took 200 loaves of bread. She didn't dawdle, she hurried. And 2 jugs of wine and 5 sheep already prepared and 5 measures of roasted grain and 100 clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs, and loaded them on donkeys. And she said to her young man, "Go on before me, I'm coming after you." But she didn't tell her husband Nabal. I think what Abigail is realizing in this situation is, man, I've got to do something myself here. Like, I've been relying on something to happen. I've been trusting him to look after it. And guys, maybe this is just a kick up the pants for us. When our wives are trusting us to do some stuff and they've been waiting for us to look after it, but we're not doing it, and then they move on. They look after things themselves, and then how do we feel? She's making the decision, she's making the call, because the guy himself wasn't what she needed. He wasn't looking out, he wasn't covering her. He wasn't protecting her. She didn't tell her husband Nabal, and it came about as she was riding on a donkey and coming down by the hidden part of the mountain that, behold, David and his men were coming down toward her. And so she met them. Now, David had just said, and I want you to catch this because this is what we've been talking about. He just said, "Surely in vain I've guarded all that man has in his wilderness." Like, what a waste of my life. Like, what did I think I was doing? Like, his first emotional reaction was, who does he think he is? Like, have I not done what I should have done? Now it's becoming pervasive. Now it's spreading in David's heart. He's now just saying, why did I look after the guy in the first place? What a waste of my time. Like, why would I ever think that everything would come out of it? He was just saying that to the guys. David had just said, "Surely in vain I've guarded all that man has in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that Nabal belonged to Nabal. He's returned to me evil for good. May God do to me by morning if I leave so much as one male who belongs to him." David, who in the previous chapter wouldn't even take out the king that was chasing to kill him, who trusted God for his future and for his destiny, knew that he was going to be the king, but wouldn't touch Saul, who was trying to kill him. This very same guy is now in the position who says, you know what? To heck with it. Calling or no calling. This guy's insulted me and my team. We're going to take him out. Yes, guys. Come on. Let's go. He says, to heck with it. Like, there's no point. It's hopeless. Why am I even trying to be nice to people? Why should I hold on to this when this is how people treat me? And he got to the point where he says, you know what? Let's just go and get rid of all of them. And I wonder if we might ever get in a situation where this is the progression in our thinking. You know what? Well, if that's the way they're going to be, blah, 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 blah. And you start taking matters into your own hands. Start solving problems yourself without trusting God to be at work in the lives of other people and situations and circumstances. And thankfully, this wise woman rocks up in his world. When Abigail sees David, she hurries. She dismounts from her donkey. She falls on her face before David, bows herself to the ground. She fell on her feet. She fell at his feet and said, "On me alone, my Lord, be the blame." What a woman. "Please let your maidservant speak to you and listen to the words of your maidservant. Please do not let my Lord pay attention to this worthless man, Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name and folly is with him. But I am your maidservant. I didn't see your young men, my Lord, whom you sent. Now, therefore, my Lord, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, since the Lord has restrained you from shedding blood and from avenging yourself by your own hand, now then let your enemies and those who seek evil against my Lord be as Nabal. Let this gift, which your maidservant has brought to my Lord, be given to the young men who accompany my Lord. Please forgive the transgression of your maidservant." Like, she knew how to make an apology. "For the Lord will certainly," listen to this, Abigail is now reminding David of his big picture. He'd lost sight of the big picture. And it takes an intelligent, good-looking woman to rock up in his world and say, "David, remember your big picture." Where are we? Verse 28. Please forgive me. Verse 29. No, verse 28b. For the Lord will certainly make for my Lord an enduring house, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil will not be found in you all of your days. She prophesies to him. Should anyone rise up to pursue you and to seek your life, then the life of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of the living with the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will sling out as from the hollow of a sling. And when the Lord does for my Lord according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and appoints you ruler over Israel, this will not cause grief or a troubled heart to my Lord, both by having shed blood without cause, and by my Lord having avenged himself. When the Lord deals well with my Lord, then remember your maidservant. And what she says to him is, David, what do you think you're doing? You're going to come and kill innocent people, and yet you're destined for great things. And maybe we need to hear that this morning when we try and take circumstances and situations into our own hand, and we think, and we lose sight of the fact that you and I are destined, we are hardwired for the big picture in God. David is now being confronted by his stupidity. He's going to go and try and take these guys out. And Abigail says, no, David, don't do that, because one day you'll be king. And when you're king, you don't want to look back on this moment in time, this slice, this little sliver of your life. You don't want to look back and feel guilty about that now that you have all of this to do, and now you've stepped into all of this, and now your family has become this, and now your kids are stepping into these realms. You don't want to have that on your conscience. And it's a huge reminder to us to keep the big picture in mind when we're going through stuff, day by day, and realizing that actually this is not the end of the story. Paul, the Apostle Paul, ends up in a shipwreck. And this is his attitude. Let's read what he says. He says about it on the next slide. Paul, we're pressured in every way, but we're not crushed. We're perplexed, confused, but we're not in despair. We're persecuted, but God hasn't left us alone. We're not abandoned. We're struck down, but we're not destroyed. Can you hear the big picture conviction that Paul is carrying? It doesn't matter what you do to my body or to my brain or to my life. I know that God's unfolding something. I want to close out this morning, and then I'm going to invite the team to come and talk to us. I want to think very quickly about what Jesus said. All right, let's read these verses. This is in John chapter 16. He's talking to his disciples. Do you remember how over the last few weeks I've been explaining and trying to get us to catch the picture of where Jesus says, guys, don't talk about me until you understand the power of my resurrection. When you understand the power of my resurrection, go for it, because you'll be transformed. You'll recognize that I have overcome death. When you understand that, your entire life and your entire future and your entire big picture has changed. If you try and solve the world's problems, when you don't understand that big picture, you'll do it in your own strength. He's talking to them before this happens. He's saying to them, a time is coming, and in fact has now come, when you are going to run away from me. You're going to be scattered, each one to your own home. You will all leave me alone, yet I am not alone, because my Father's with me. What's he saying? Guys, you might wreck off, but I have a bigger picture. My Father is with me. I've told you these things so that in me you can have peace. In the world you're going to have trouble, but take heart. I've overcome the world. What he doesn't say, and this is incredible, and you should get some encouragement from this. He doesn't say, and I don't know how I'm going to do it, because you guys are going to desert me. And I don't know if, I spent all these 3 years with you, and you're going to leave me, you're going to run away, and gosh, my whole ministry is a failure. He doesn't say that. He says, you can do whatever you want to do. It's not changing the God big picture in my life. And because of that, he then goes to the cross. Because of that, some other things happen in your life. Because he wasn't distracted by other people around him. Because he kept his big picture in mind. Now you have a big picture of eternity in front of you. When you grasp his love for you and his compassion and his plans and his purposes, you don't need to get sidetracked by one day, by one conversation, by 1 week, by a month, by a year, even by a few years of difficulty, of challenge. You need to understand that he saved you to put you back into a position that you were originally created and intended to be, to experience what he's intended you to experience in his presence, and that's the future that is in front of you. Let's close out with Colossians chapter 3, verse 1. This is a verse we looked at when we did Colossians. Since then, because of this, understanding this, because you know this is true, because you've been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things that are above, where Christ is seated. Come on, lift your perspective. Get up out of the mud. Get up out of the situation. Like lift your head up over the wall. Have a bigger look. Have a wider perspective of what God's doing. You are seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things that are above, not on the things that are happening to your body, to your emotions in earth. You died. Your life is now hidden with Christ. In a few moments, Sam's going to be baptized. That's what he's saying. He's saying, I'm going under the water. My life is dead because Christ has risen me to a new hope and a new future in the things of God. That is so incredibly exciting. Let me just take a moment before I ask the team to come, because there's going to be a transition in the service. Would you just take a moment and bow your head in prayer? Let me pray with you. As I've been speaking, the Holy Spirit's been bringing situations to mind. Been bringing challenges and experiences that you're going through right now. And he's been reminding you graciously. And I just pray that this has been helpful for you. I really believe that it's a God message for today. Just reminding you that this is not the end of your story. Don't lose sight of the big picture. So now let's bring our situations to Jesus. Just in this moment, and say, Jesus, I don't know what to do with this. This is messy. It's painful. It's got all of the awkwardness of everything that you would never want. And I just want to present it back to you. And I want you to come into my heart and into my life. And I want that thing that you said to the disciples to be true in me, where you said, I can be at peace because you have overcome the world. And so, Jesus, over every person in the auditorium this morning, I release your blessing, the blessing of your peace in the middle of situations and circumstances that we are out of control. We can't change it. It's happened to us. It's like a Nabal situation. We didn't even know what was going on around us, and here we are. And now we're coming to you because we need your intervention in our lives. And so in the name of Jesus, by the power of the Holy Spirit, I declare to you this morning, I speak to your spirit, I speak to your life, I speak the courage and the peace that you need right here, right now, to not lose sight of God's big picture in your life. That you would hold on to it and never let go of where God is taking you, to trust Him to look after you, to trust Him that He has you in His hand, that He's looking after you. And you might be watching online and you've never trusted Jesus, you've never committed your life to Him. Or you might be in the auditorium today visiting for the first time, and you realize that God loves you in a new way. And that journey begins with a simple prayer where you say, Jesus, I'm a sinner. I need you. Would you come into my life? I don't want to do it by my own. I want you to help me. I'm a sinner. I need your forgiveness. Would you cleanse me and wash me and put me on a new path so that I can have a big picture in my life as well? And if you pray that prayer, in a few moments, we'll have an opportunity to pray together. All right? Helpful?